In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. Like you, I've had that drilled into my head for years. But does the Greek text really say that the Word was God? No, it doesn't say that at all. Listen to me again, it does not say that. I'll show you what it really does say in very simple terms, so you don't need to be a swami to translate the thing yourself. It's really, really simple. Here's what it says in Greek. Enarchi in ho logos, kai ho logos in pros ton theon, kai theos in ho logos, ustos in enarchi pros ton theon. Now, I only speak good English and bad English, so anybody who speaks Greek, I'm sorry for the sandpaper on your ears because I'm not good at pronouncing Greek words. Now let's take a closer look at the part translated, and the Word was God. It actually reads verbatim, and God was the Word. Look at it again, and God was the Word? What does that mean? Taken prima facie, it literally means God is just a word, rather than the Creator who does the speaking. That's a really big problem. Since that doesn't work in Greek, English, or any other language, translators just twisted the nouns, God and the Word, to correct John's alleged typos and create an even bigger problem. But John didn't have any divinely inspired typos. He wrote by the unction of the Holy Spirit, who knows his languages better than we do. Everything was written without the need for men to correct God. So what did John really mean before we all started to believe what the men who presumed they could correct God had to tell us? Well, it's the simplest thing in the world to understand if we stay within the grammar of the text. Let me show you. All 4 clauses to the introduction to the Gospel of John are made up of just 10 very simple words. In total, there are 24 words that make up the simple ellipsis within a simple parallelism. If you've never heard of those terms before, don't worry about it, because you'll immediately recognize the patterns if you've ever read poetry or listened to music. You know what rhyming is? You get the idea. An ellipsis is an omission that's defined by the context. If you've ever said, "I'll see you later," the unspoken ellipsis is, "I'm leaving." It's not that tough to figure out. Now look at the 10 words. They're really very simple, and they form very simple thoughts. But not one of those words are doctrinal in nature. In the beginning, the Word was, with the God. Let me explain this like Lego's simple, because it really is. The first opening simple thought is in the beginning. The next simple thought was the Word, and is a conjunction joining that line to the next line. The Word was. It's repeated. The thought with the God has a definite article. In English, we just capitalize the G on God, so the definite article, the, is only required in Greek. This is the entire statement. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And it uses all of the words except for the pronoun he, meaning the Word. So in effect, all of the words are used in this opening statement. Now you'll see all of those words repeated. That forms a very simple parallelism, typical of parallelisms found throughout the Bible. Look at the pattern. It should be pretty obvious what the subject is by now. And it starts off with a second conjunction to link the next thought. Another thought about God, but notice that it's missing the definite article, and it's missing it for a very important reason. It's called an ellipsis. And the word was is repeated a third time. Now in an ellipsis, the subject supplies the omitted words. We have a very strong indication of what those words are right above in green, and we're about to be given a second witness in the following verse, so we don't have to guess. He was is the same thought as the word was. It's just substituting a pronoun for the proper noun. Now you can't just insert Led Zeppelin, no matter how bad you want to assume that, because it's just not in the text, and we have to stay within the context. It's the Word. In the beginning bookends the subject, and that subject is who was with whom in the beginning. It's very clear and unmistakable. Now that big green space is obviously missing 2 words before God, based on the structure of the other ones. That's obvious because if God was the Word, then the Creator before him who spoke him into existence would have to be another God above him. And we know that's definitely not what John meant, nor is it supported in the text. So let's look at the same thought in green, before and after, that sandwiches the omission so clearly that a child can even get it. The definite article the has been omitted deliberately because it's redundant. It's used twice already, so we know that it's the God, but we'll put it in now just so nobody gets confused. But that simple thought about God isn't complete, because what other redundant word was omitted simply because it was said twice? Now look hard and try to guess what the recurring thought about God says. The omission of the article was deliberate because it was redundant. Now what other omission makes the whole thing work just by what's given by the context? With the God. That's the nature of a parallelism with a second witness by the subject, so we don't have to guess what word the ellipsis provides for us in the text. It's all there. The subject always supplies the ellipsis, which defines who was with whom in the beginning. That's the subject, so we don't have to guess. It's given to us. From the parallelism shown by colored blocks, you don't need to be a Swami to notice the pattern that John gave us by design of the Holy Spirit. Now, commissioned translators tear that up and presume to correct the deliberate pattern that John wrote to force their own private interpretation into the text. But let's just assume that the Holy Spirit didn't feed John typos or poor sentence structure that needs to be corrected by dogmatic men like they want us to believe. Let's just assume that this structure was intentional and John didn't need any human help writing this. Let's assume to just go by the same parallelisms and ellipses found throughout the Bible and see what happens. The passage emphasizes exactly what the subject establishes, who was with whom in the beginning. Without rearranging or twisting what John wrote, the ellipsis defines itself for us and makes perfect sense without breaking the first commandment, consistent with all divine revelation since the beginning, just as John intended to write, rather than John sending secret messages of crypto-polytheism that overturns millennia of the testimonies of God and his prophets, as if Moses was told that God is one, but would later turn out to be three gods plus a fourth triune being above all. You really have to want to believe that to imagine it here. Let me show you how bad. Without any literary justification, following no standard rule of rhetoric or grammar, translators typically break John's ellipsis on their own authority to reword what John wrote to fit their dogma. This is the big secret they're not telling you. The rules they follow to translate this don't exist. But let's pretend for a moment that there is some magical rule the rest of us just don't know about. Let's see how their supposedly standard translation method works by merely changing the nouns. That's the thing about rules of grammar and rhetoric. They're standard rules, and they must hold up to a simple noun change without failing to express the identical idea. So let's see what happens. All I did was change the setting, because Moses was in the tabernacle with God, and I changed the word to Moses. I just changed the nouns. But using the identical translation method that we're supposed to believe is real, it should still hold true. But if you look, quickly turns into insanity. And Moses was God? That's what that translation method would produce. And that should tell you something, that their method is just a private interpretation, applicable only here, and it's not a rule at all. Now, the only rules that do hold true are the ellipsis and the parallelism that makes total sense out of the grammar. It's the only translation method that works because the rules apply in a standard manner, as all rules do. They have to, otherwise they're not a rule, right? And truth is truth because truth is universal, unless you're making up your own private interpretation like Jim Jones mixing up another batch of theological Kool-Aid. Occam's razor applies here. The simplest explanation is the right one, and it's in accord with the law of God, the Shema, and its grammatic rules hold true universally, leaving only one true and correct translation, and this is how it reads. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and with God was the Word. He was in the beginning with God.
You'll know more about the Book of Revelation than any expert today. Available now at the App Store and on Google Play.